Floor the pedal at the green light. Watch the traffic all drift right. Barrel forward unimpeded. Switch lanes as needed. Be flexible. Be unreplaceable. In a world of heavy footprints, be untraceable. I'm really excited about this episode. You see, when I started this project, I originally had the idea of generally picking the songs first, right? And making the decks based on the songs. But then I spotted the commander for this deck, Vazi Keen Negotiator. And just on a whim, I built it. Jund has always been a tough color combination for me for some reason, even though it speaks exactly to the stuff that I like to do in Commander. I've just never quite been able to make it work. Vazi seemed pretty cool. So I started putting, colors together, or cards together in those colors. And as I was building it, the lyrics to this song, Wage Wars, Get Rich, Die Handsome, just kept going through my mind. And I realized that for the first time, I'd put together a deck that matched the themes of one of the Mountain Goat songs, and I had done it in the reverse order. So this deck has actually seen a few different iterations. Unlike some of the previous ones, I've gotten to play this pretty extensively. It's gotten 6 or 7 different runs at different tables and different metas, and I've had a really, really great time with it each time. So you all get to hear about it today. I'm very pleased with this one. The song Wage Wars, Get Rich, Die Handsome is off of the newest Mountain Goats album, Bleed Out. Bleed Out is there's always a bit of a time gap between when the songs are conceived and written and when they get put onto an album. So the tracks on this album were written relatively early in the pandemic. Things were still kind of on lockdown, and John was watching a lot of action movies. And so there's a lot of high energy in this album. There's a lot of themes that you'll find in action movies, and this entire thing has some of the old pace of Mountain Goats albums. It's really fast paced. This song in particular reminds me a lot of the kind of pop punk that I would hear in like the mid to late 90s. Specifically, there's an Eve 6 song called Open Road Song that just, they're not that similar in terms of presentation or structure or anything like that, but they just feel like they're a good pair of songs. Like the person who is being told to floor the pedal at the green light in the opening lyrics probably has Open Road Song playing on the speakers while this is happening, at least in my head. That's just how my brain works anyway. So these songs were done early in the pandemic. There's a lot of almost isolated energy about them to me. There's a sense of freedom to them. There's a sense of inevitability of like the ending of things, and how in a lot of crime and action movies, a lot of heist movies, there are no good endings for just about anybody. And that's the album Bleed Out. This song just, it's one of those songs that just moves forward. The person in the song who is doing these things, who is to wage wars and get rich and die handsome, is not a good person. I don't think many of the people in these songs in this album are good people. But the whole album's a lot of fun, and this song in particular is one that just sticks with me. So that brings us to the deck itself, and we're going to switch over early this time, so I can go over what all is in here, because there's a lot going on in this particular deck. It has a lot of pieces that at first glance don't seem to work in concert with one another, but it's kind of emblematic of those lines: be flexible, be unreplaceable. Like, there are very few things that I could see taking out of this deck, and they all work together to allow you to explore the multiple lanes that this deck can take very effectively. It's a lot of fun. So first of all, let's start with our commander. That is Vazi, Key Negotiator. Vazi came from the commander cards in the New Capenna set. I believe that Vazi did not appear in any of the precons. I think she was only available in the set boosters. But anyway, she costs 2 in Jund, 3/3 with haste. You can tap her and target opponent creates X treasure tokens, where X is the number of treasure tokens you created this turn. That's pretty cool. And then whenever an opponent casts a spell or activates an ability, if mana from a treasure was spent to cast or activate it, I get to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, then draw a card. So Vazi has a lot of lanes just built into it. Inherently a political commander, you can ramp other people and accelerate their board state by giving them treasure tokens, and you are making a lot of them. But because you're giving them out, I have found that it tends to lull people into a slightly false sense of security. You're like, oh, you're my friend, you gave me treasures. Because, even a couple treasures is very often enough to accelerate someone else's deck into their strategy. The cool thing, though, is that when Vazi is out, if anyone spends treasure for any reason, and it's each instance of spend, it's not per treasure token. So say someone has 3 treasure tokens, whether Vazi gave them to the player or not, if a treasure is spent by an opponent to do a thing, then whoever has Vazi gets to put a +1/+1 counter on a creature and draw a card. So the base strategy would then seem to lean in favor of putting +1/+1 counters on things and then swinging with them. So everything's I've got my piles divided up as usual. I didn't do these divisions in Moxfield for the deck list because it's not quite as cut and dried as it may seem initially. So we're going to start going through these categories real quick. And the first category I have set up, I'm just sort of calling these enablers. These are cards that help you set up your strategy or have payoffs for treasures, either you using them or opponents sacrificing them. So we've got Marionette Master sitting in there. 1/3 with Fabricate, you can either give the Marionette Master counters or put servos into play, and the important part is when an artifact you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to Marionette Master's power. So that's a payoff for you spending your treasures. We have the Sardian Avenger, which came out in the Dominaria United commander cards. Again, set boosters only. Goblin Warrior, First Strike Trample. Whenever Sardian Avenger attacks, gets +X/+0 until the end of the turn, where X is the number of artifacts your opponents control. That's all artifacts, all opponents, tokens and non-tokens. And whenever an artifact an opponent controls is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, Sardian Avenger deals 1 damage to that player. Again, nice payoffs. We have Stormkiln Artist. +1/+0 for each artifact you control, there's treasures, and then Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, create a treasure token. This is going to be important. We're going to come back to this in a little bit because there's a whole other branch to this deck based around instants and sorceries. So keep the Magecraft ability firmly in mind. We have Gutter Snipe. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, Gutter Snipe deals 2 damage to each opponent. Again, a payoff we're hinting at with those. We have 2 haste enablers in Gorogoro, Disciple of Ryusei, and Urabrask the Hidden. So each of them in their own ways can give your board haste, and Urabrask makes your opponent's stuff come into play tapped. Gorogoro also can let you make 5/5 dragons, which can be very relevant because you're going to have modified creatures from the +1/+1 counters that go on things you control from Vazi. We have Zagreus, Thief of Heartbeats. The party mechanic, not so much important, but Flying Death Touch, haste, and other creatures you control have Death Touch, and they also have Planeswalker Death Touch, which especially in the world following the release of All Will Be One, Planeswalker Death Touch could be extremely relevant. So you just get to destroy Planeswalkers if you hit them with one of your Death Touchers. Ornithopter of Paradise, mana ramp. Pitiless Plunderer, whenever another creature you control dies, you make some treasure. Augur of Autumn lets you do some good Coven stuff and cast things off the top of your deck, play lands from the top of your library. It's also just nice to know what's coming. Mahadi Emporium Master, at the beginning of your end step, create a treasure token for each creature that died this turn. Shambling Gas, just a great sack target, make some treasure. Magda, Brazen Outlaw, whenever a dwarf you control becomes tapped, create a treasure, sack 5 treasures, find an artifact or a dragon. Got to be very relevant for the other category we're going to do next. And then Goblin and Archomancer, just get your green and red spells costing less. Yeah, your green and red spells costing less to cast. Words are great. Then we have, these are our treasure cards, right? These are the cards, the creature cards specifically, that are designed to make treasure as they're being used. So, Skullport Merchant, when it ETBs, make a treasure, sacrifice a treasure or a creature, draw a card. Hoarding Ogre makes treasures on die rolls. You're going to get at least 1. You make it up to 3 if your rolls are good. Ganex Astral Hunter, when it or another dragon ETBs, make a treasure. There are other dragons in here. Gala Greeters, I love the fancy one here. Alliance, whenever another creature ETBs, either put a +1/+1 counter on this, make a tap treasure, gain 2 life. Fantastic. We're making lots of, we have lots of creature ETBs. Old Gnawbone, fantastic way to get treasure onto the board. Any creature deals combat damage, you make that many treasure tokens. So you hit with 1/6/6, and that's 6 treasures, which you can then give to somebody else with Vazi, right? Impulsive Pilferer, when it dies, create a treasure token, but you can encore it and make copies of it for multiple treasures. This is not a creature card, but it still belongs in this pile. Sticky Fingers gives something menace, and when it does combat damage, create a treasure. When it dies, draw a card. Rapacious Dragon, when it ETBs, make 2 treasure tokens. Treasure Vault, again, not a creature, like I said, but you can pay X twice and sacrifice this and make that many treasure tokens. It's just really useful. You can even use treasure to make treasure, which, like, you're not making more mana based on that, but it still gives you more to do with Vazi. Zorn, if you create 1 or more treasures, create 1 more, that many +1. Prosperous Innkeeper ETBs with a treasure token, and whenever another creature comes into play, you gain a life. Zeatora the Incinerator, at the beginning of your end step, sack another creature. If you do, damage equal to the creature's power to any target, and you make 3 treasure. Rose Room Treasurer. Creatures ETB make a treasure the first or second time it's resolved. If it resolves a third time, you can pay X, and it deals X damage to any target. Professional Facebreaker gives you more value off of your treasures and lets you make treasures. And then Ancient Bronze Dragon. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, roll a d20, put that many counters on creatures. Just big game there. Obviously, a great ad for this deck would be Goldspan Dragon. I don't happen to own one, and as I mentioned before, I tend to build these decks based on cards that I already own. So, Goldspan would be a fantastic ad here. I just don't happen to have one. So, you check out the deck list, you think it needs a Goldspan, you have one, slot a Goldspan in there. We then have 2 other creatures sort of sitting here off to the side. These are Undermountain Adventurer and Caves of Chaos Adventurer, because with everything that's going on and all the combat you're doing, having the initiative is super helpful. This deck has made me love the initiative. I only have these 2 initiative cards in here. There's one other card that can advance you through a dungeon if you've got the initiative already, which can be exploited in the setup that we have here. But these 2 are just great. It only takes 6 rooms, like 6 triggers of the initiative to trigger all of them. So you can get a lot of value off of either of these 2 cards. And then once you have completed a dungeon, their abilities get even better. So 6 green mana from the Undermountain Adventurer and Caves of Chaos Adventurer. When it attacks you, exile the top card of your library. You can cast it normally or play it, so lands too. But if you've completed a dungeon, then you can do so for free. So you can just get a lot of value off of those 2. We have a couple of enchantments here that are both treasure-based. So we have Reign of Riches and we have Loot Dispute. Reign of Riches lets you cascade off your first treasure spell or spell that you've used treasure to cast. And Loot Dispute, it is an initiative card, so you take the initiative on that one. And then whenever you attack a player who has the initiative, you make treasure. And if you create a dungeon, there's another 5/5 dragon. Just very useful. So that's sort of the creature side of things. A few non-creatures in that pile, like I mentioned, but those are the ones you're going to be wanting to turn sideways and swing in for damage and make treasure off of their effects. Then there is the Spellslinger side of this deck, and that all hinges around this card here, which is Arcane Bombardment. Another one of my favorites from New Capenna. It can read a little complicated, but I've played it on Arena, and that's how I figured out how it works. Whenever you cast your first instant or sorcery spell each turn, exile an instant or sorcery card at random from your graveyard. Then copy each card exiled with Arcane Bombardment. You may cast any number of the copies without paying their mana costs. So basically, say you have an instant or sorcery, like Dark Ritual, right? You've already cast it once, it's in your graveyard. You cast another instant or sorcery while Arcane Bombardment is out. At random, you choose an instant or sorcery from your graveyard. For this example, that's just Dark Ritual. So Dark Ritual then goes underneath Arcane Bombardment. You've cast the instant or sorcery, say it's Farseek, that goes in your graveyard. Now, the next time you cast an instant or sorcery, like say Nature's Lore, you cast Nature's Lore, that trigger goes on the stack. Then everything that's underneath Arcane Bombardment, then you exile a card at random. We have another one, Farseek. So Farseek and Dark Ritual are now under Arcane Bombardment. You then cast those two for free, right? Anytime you have an instant or sorcery spell. So you just keep adding instants or sorceries underneath Arcane Bombardment, and those ignore the timing rules. So even if it's a sorcery, you can cast it at instant speed if it's from Arcane Bombardment's trigger, because it says you may cast any number of copies without paying their mana costs. So you just keep loading them up. So we have a whole pile of really, really solid instants and sorcery, stuff that you would run anyway, that you can get a bunch of value off of if they're under Arcane Bombardment and you get multiple triggers of them. So for example, if there is a Jeska's Will and your commander is out, it's a cast. You can do both modes, and you can do it multiple times because it's under Arcane Bombardment. So Unexpected Windfall, Turn Timber Symbiosis, Seize the Spotlight, more treasures, Shamanic Revelation, draw a bunch of cards, Valakut Awakening, Wheel Yourself, Weather the Storm. We're going to come back to Weather the Storm because I had a lot of fun with this one, so we're going to set this up here. Seize the Spoils, Draw and Treasures, Unexpected Fangs, unexpectedly give something lifelink permanently and +1/+1. You find a Cursed Idol, another way to go through the dungeon, Artifact Enchantment Removal. Past in Flames, this will let you get your stuff that is in the graveyard that's not been put under Arcane Bombardment randomly back. It's only one time because they have flashback, but still extremely useful. Feed the Swarm, Village Rites, Rakdos Charm, Kolaghan's Command, Diabolic Intent. I don't tend to run tutors, but in this deck, because I want to be able to find specifically Arcane Bombardment, it's in here. And then Lethal Scheme. We're going to skip over the juicy bit for just a second because there are just a few more instants and sorceries here, right? We've got some Recursion out of your graveyard, Reanimate and Balaget Recovery, very useful. And then some board wipes, Reckless Endeavor, Blood Money, and Rise of the Dark Realms. They're all expensive, but you get a lot of treasure in this deck, so I found them very easy to cast. And they can go under Arcane Bombardment. You can literally have Blood Money sitting there to cast whenever, as long as you have another instant of sorcery in hand to trigger Arcane Bombardment. So this is where this other little last bit comes in. We have Geist Flame Reservoir in there. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a charge counter on Geist Flame Reservoir. You are casting the copies, so they are cast triggers. You can pay 1 in red and tap and remove any number of charge counters and deal that much damage to any target. So you could potentially get enough counters on here to alpha strike somebody out. Or you can exile the top card of your library and play it. But then we have my favorite thing, which is Isochron Scepter. Imprint a card on here. An instant card with converted mana cost of 2 or less. You exile it under Isochron Scepter, and then you can play it anytime you can tap Isochron Scepter. So there are a decent number of 2 mana or less instants or sorceries in this deck, so you can trigger Arcane Bombardment whenever you want to. I did it once by using Weather the Storm. Just says gain 3 life, but it has Storm. And the way these triggers stack is perfect. So You've got Weather the Storm underneath Arcane Bombard, or underneath the Isochron Scepter. Arcane Bombardment is out with, let's just say 5 instants and sorceries underneath it. So you pay the 2, you tap the Isochron Scepter, and you cast Weather the Storm. That trigger goes on the stack. That then triggers Arcane Bombardment. Arcane Bombardment's trigger goes on the stack on top of Weather the Storm stack. So you then do however many spells, you exile another one, however many spells under Arcane Bombardment. And say you can choose to cast them, so you're not required to. So you don't want to board wipe with Blood Money, don't board wipe with Blood Money. You have all these triggers, you're casting all these spells, and that builds your storm count. So then you resolve those spells. After they've all resolved, Weather the Storm resolves, and you gain, 15 life? 18? 21? My life total got ridiculous in the game that I got this off. And the reason I think this is so effective, it's a few different things, right? There's a lot of different components going on here in this deck. All of the instants of sorceries are spells that you would want to cast anyway. All the creatures are creatures you would want to cast anyway. Vazi gives you the treasure to do all of them. And because you're coming at the win from so many different potential angles, it can really throw people off their game. They can focus on one thing or another, and then suddenly you are playing you have an old Gnawbone out and you play the Ancient Bronze Dragon while you have a haste enabler, and you're swinging for 7, who knows how much damage, right? You're getting a lot of treasures off of that, but then you're easing the wound. You're just easing the sting by giving those treasures away. It's just a lot of fun to play. I haven't ever really had it stall out on me so far because treasures naturally accelerate things. There's a lot of card draw baked into this. You can get access to more cards with the Professional Facebreaker. There's a lot of really, really good and neat stuff going on in this deck, and I really like how the enablers and the treasure creatures and the initiative and the spellslinger stuff all works together underneath this one lovely commander. This is probably my favorite deck that I have built in a long time, be it for this show or not. I just really, really, really enjoy it, and it's been a lot of fun to play. So that is the deck headed by Vazi, Keen Negotiator, for Wage Wars, Get Rich, Die Handsome. You may be asking yourself, I can see the waging wars, right? You've got a lot of creatures, you got spells, you're dealing damage, blah, blah, blah. You're getting rich. You're making a lot of treasures. The Die Handsome part, well, friend, that's you. Because just like me, you are so, so handsome. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for the Mountain Goats Meets Magic the Gathering for this week. In closing, a couple of things that I want to draw your attention to. The first is that there is a fantastic, fantastic bundle of tabletop RPGs and digital games that is called Trans Witches Are Witches. I don't know if you know this, but I'm non-binary. That means I am transgender. And the recent release of the new Harry Potter game, the new Wizard game, yeah, it kind of sucks. J.K. Rowling is a horrible, transphobic pile of walking garbage, and this bundle was put together by a group of queer creators to support queer creators. You will find the link to the itch page in the show notes on both the video and the podcast side. You can spend $60 and get over 50 games and support queer creators directly rather than supporting someone who, one, even if she were a fine person, doesn't need your money, and two, is not a fine person and is going to use your money to further her hateful agenda. That sucks. Give your money to people who can actually use it. If you are experiencing financial hardship right now, there is a $10 version of the bundle. The bundle runs for another almost 2 weeks. It just launched this past Friday, so it's only been live for a few days, and it's already massively exceeding expectations. So you'll find links there. Really think it's a great cause. I do have a game in the bundle, so I do directly benefit from this. So this is not technically paid promotion, but I get paid the more better this does, so go buy bundle games. Anyway, the last thing is, of course, the usual ending stuff for a podcast like this. I have a Patreon, patreon.com/theothertracy. You can support me directly and help me continue to do videos like this and deck builds and all that good stuff. You also can go and leave reviews if you want to, and leaving reviews on the audio side especially lets people know what's going on. It boosts it in the algorithm so more people can find it, all that good stuff. On YouTube, like, subscribe, leave a comment. You know how all this works. You're online, you get it. The other last thing is that tonight on Twitch at twitch.tv/OneShotRPG, I will be playing this deck on my show, Holding Priority. I play EDH most every Monday night. I've got a fantastic group of players who are coming in with me this evening, and I'm really excited to show again what this deck can do. So again, twitch.tv/OneShotRPG, the Patreon, patreon.com/TheOtherTracy, and the Trans Witches Are Witches bundle that you will find linked below. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you later. Bye.